talk about the 1990 adaptation of It, most of the conversation tends to focus on the first half. The kids, the childhood nostalgia, and of course Tim Curry's nightmare-inducing Pennywise. But the second half of the miniseries shifts the story forward 30 years, bringing the Losers Club back to Derry as adults. Part 2 is where the story becomes less about childhood fears and more about unfinished business. Picking up decades after the events of Part 1, the surviving members of the Losers Club have gone on to live very different lives. They've grown up, moved away from Derry, and in many cases buried their memories of what happened when they were kids. But Mike Hanlon, the only member who stayed behind in Derry, begins noticing a pattern that he's been dreading for years. Children are disappearing again. Mike realizes what that means. The creature they fought as kids has returned. One by one, he calls the other members of the Losers Club and reminds them of a promise they made long ago. If the monster ever came back, they would return to Derry and finish what they started. For some of them, the memories come flooding back immediately. For others, it's like a fog slowly lifting. But either way, the group reluctantly reunites in the town they hope to never see again. As adults, they begin retracing their childhood experiences and realizing that Pennywise never truly left. The creature has been waiting, feeding, and manipulating the town from the shadows once again. And just like before, it starts confronting them with manifestations of their deepest fears. The adult version of Bill Denbrough is played by Richard Thomas. By the time It aired, Thomas was already widely recognized for his role as John Boy Walton on the long-running series The Waltons. He'd built a strong reputation as a dramatic television actor, and his portrayal of Bill captures the character's lingering guilt over his brother Georgie's death, as well as his determination to finally put an end to Pennywise. Beverly Marsh is played by Annette O'Toole. O'Toole had already appeared in a wide range of film and television roles, including Superman 3, and she later became familiar to a new generation of viewers as Martha Kent on the TV series Smallville. In It, Beverly's storyline explores the painful cycle of abuse she's carried into adulthood, echoing the troubled home life we saw in Part 1. Adult Ben Hanscom is played by John Ritter. Ritter was one of the most recognizable television actors of the era, thanks to his beloved role on the sitcom Three's Company. But he also had a strong dramatic side that often gets overlooked. In It, he plays Ben as a successful architect who never quite lost the shy, kind-hearted personality he had as a kid. Richie Tozier is played by Harry Anderson, who many viewers knew as the magician-turned-judge on the sitcom Night Court. Anderson's comedic background fits Richie perfectly, since the character has grown up to become a professional comedian. But underneath the humor, the film shows Richie struggling with the same fear he used jokes to hide as a child. Dennis Christopher plays Eddie Kasprek, the once fragile kid who grew into an adult still haunted by his anxieties. Christopher had previously gained attention for starring in the cycling drama Breaking Away and had appeared in several genre films. His performance keeps Eddie's nervous energy intact while showing how deeply the past has affected him. Mike Hanlon, the group's researcher and the only one who stayed in Derry, is played by Tim Reed. Reed was already well known for his role on the sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati, and later co-starred in the family series Sister Sister. As Mike, he serves as the emotional anchor of the story, the one person who never escaped the shadow hanging over the town. And Stanley Uris, played in adulthood by Richard Masur, has perhaps the most tragic arc of the group. Masur was a veteran character actor with numerous television and film roles, including appearances in projects like The Thing. Stanley's storyline highlights the psychological toll that their childhood encounter with Pennywise left behind. One of the most interesting things about Part 2 is how it was received compared to the first half. When the miniseries originally aired, viewers were just as curious about the adult storyline, but critics and fans quickly noticed the difference in tone. The kids' story had the advantage of discovery and suspense. The adult story is more reflective, more psychological, and sometimes a little stranger. Reviews at the time were mixed. Critics still praised Tim Curry's performance and appreciated the emotional weight carried by the adult cast, but some felt the second half struggled to maintain the same level of tension as the childhood storyline. Budget limitations also became more noticeable during the climactic confrontation with Pennywise's true form, which some viewers found underwhelming. Despite that, Part 2 still contains moments that stuck with audiences for decades. One of the most memorable scenes involved an elderly woman Beverly encounters in her childhood home, a sequence that slowly builds from awkward nostalgia to outright nightmare. It's a moment that perfectly captures the unsettling tone of the story, where familiar places suddenly become terrifying again. Watching Part 2 years later also changes the way the story feels. When you're younger, the kid's storyline is easy to connect with because it's about facing fears for the first time. But the adult storyline hits differently with age. It's about returning to things you tried to forget, the mistakes, the trauma, the promises you never hoped you'd have to keep. There's also a strong theme of memory running through the entire second half. The Losers Club slowly begins remembering details they had completely blocked out after leaving Derry. It raises an unsettling idea. Maybe the town itself has a way of making people forget. Maybe that's how the cycle of violence keeps repeating. Modern audiences often pick up on that theme much more clearly than viewers did in 1990. The story isn't just about a monster clown in the sewer. It's about the way communities bury their darkest secrets and move on as if nothing happened. Pennywise may be supernatural, but the town's silence is what allows the horror to continue. Of course, the final confrontation between the Losers Club and Pennywise is the emotional payoff for the entire miniseries. The group has to face the creature one last time. This time armed not just with childhood bravery, but with the understanding that fear itself is the monster's greatest weapon. And once again, Tim Curry steals the show. His Pennywise in the adult storyline becomes even more taunting and theatrical, mocking the characters for thinking they ever had a chance. Curry reportedly approached the role with very little makeup rehearsal, preferring to improvise parts of the character's unsettling behavior on set. That unpredictability is part of what makes the performance so memorable. Looking back today, Part 2 of It might not have the same nostalgic glow as the childhood portion, but it completes the emotional arc of the story. Without it, the first half would be just a creepy childhood adventure. The adult storyline transforms it into something bigger, a story about confronting the past and refusing to let fear define your life. And in a strange way, that message might resonate even more strongly now than it did in 1990. The older you get, the more you realize that some fears never completely disappear. Sometimes they just wait quietly in the background, like something hiding in the sewer, waiting for the right moment to come back. So which adult performances stood out the most to you in the second half? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more trips back to the video stories of old.